I'm Gigi. I am a soprano based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, just outside of St. Louis. And I studied music and Spanish and Portuguese studies at the U. So I trained in voice and I learned all about Spanish and Portuguese literature and art history, and ultimately moved to Brazil for a couple of years on a Fulbright. And now I'm back in the Twin Cities, singing with groups around town and doing personal research on Brazilian repertoire.
Hi, y'all. My name is Matthew Valverde. I currently live in Alamosa, Colorado, which is in the San Luis Valley. It's kind of south central Colorado, a little bit in the middle of nowhere. I teach here at Adams State University. I am now Associate Professor of Music, and I also serve as Inclusive Excellence Liaison here to our president, which means I support initiatives of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I chair the President's Advisory Group on Equity. I'm originally from Fort Worth, Texas. I went to school at TCU there, and then I went up to Rochester, New York, and did a master's and my doctorate in vocal performance at the Eastman School of Music. So from there, I moved to Colorado, and I'm a tenor. I sing, and I've been with Border Crossing a few times, and love Minneapolis.
Tell me a little bit about your household. How did you get started with music? What did your house sound like growing up?
Oh, that's a really great question. It's kind of interesting the way that I found my way to music. There was music around my house a lot. My parents are both singers. I think amateur singers. They just sing around the house. I'd like to say that they don't know anything about music, but for some reason, my sister and I both became musicians, and she and I came together and became closer through music and through singing together. So, what did my house sound like? There was a lot of joy. There was a lot of rancheras. There was all this soft rock music, and oldies, that I think a lot of our parents grew up listening to. That was always kind of around.
I still have this story stuck in my brain, a horror story about how you and her would sight read for fun, and then can you tell me about that? Did you guys sing a lot together?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. So I said earlier that music is really what kind of brought us together. And I think, as all siblings, well, I won't speak for everybody, but as many siblings experience, some fighting or seeking attention, there's this kind of gentle hostility between the siblings, and we were kind of at odds a lot, but when I started to learn, so I went to a school where we did solfege in my elementary school, and so when I came to when I came to junior high, I already knew solfege. I knew the hand signs. I started to learn how to read music, and thought it was the coolest thing in the world, being able to identify what pitches were and to sing stuff and to sight read. I started to learn how to do that. So I taught her how to read and how to write, how to just notate stuff, and what solfege was and hand signs, all of that stuff. So through us working on that together, we became really close, and we became friends essentially, because we were, fighting and competing prior to that. So she knew music and knew how to sight read and how, to understand music way earlier than I did, because I taught her, and I'm a couple years older. And so when she was in the 7th grade, she was already composing music and, hearing stuff in her dreams and notating it. I mean, just like these wild stories. But we used to sight read together because we had this common language between us. And so we had a very limited collection of books because, again, my parents didn't really know about this. So they didn't know what to purchase or, really what to provide for us. We had a couple of books. And so we would read through the books. And when they were done, and these were like solo lines. And so I was like, hey, I found one in G major. You find another one in G major. Oh, you're in 6/8. Oh, you're in 2/4. Okay, let's just make it work. And we would just kind of adjust as needed and sing together and whatever kind of, these are exercises not meant to be performed together. So all sorts of crazy dissonances and wild things would happen, but that would just excite us more. And so when we ran out of sight reading, we would like read things backwards or read upside down, or like imagine this exercise is in a different key, right? And so since it was not starting on where Do was expecting, lots of crazy dissonances and just wild stuff would happen. And so we were nerds, and that was a way for us.
I get that.
We were big nerds.
I'm gaining that from this conversation.
Can we do this next time you're in town?
Let's do it. I would love to.
I want to do this.
So we would, when my mother would go into the grocery store to go shopping, it's like, I don't want to go in there. And so we'd be in the back seat, just sight singing with our pitch pipe to find our pitch, until my sister had perfect pitch. And then we knew exactly where to start.
What did your household sound like? How did you get started with music?
Yeah. Music was always going throughout the house, most of it being songs that my mom would make up and sing around. So she would have a theme song for both me and my little brother.
What's your theme song?
I do remember it, but the words are getting all mixed up in my mouth. Huffin' Puffin' Blueberry Muffin, Mama's Little Beanbag Girl. And it's kind of this little jazzy tune. I'm a cutie and a sweetie and my name's Regina May, Mama's Little Beanbag Girl. And she would bounce me around.
I love that.
Yeah. Can I sing that all over again so that I'm not chopped all up? I'm a huffin', I'm a puffin', I'm a blueberry muffin', I'm a mama's little beanbag girl. I'm a cutie and a sweetie and my name's Regina May, mama's little beanbag girl. Classical voice actually came into my life more through language rather than choral singing or through piano specifically, because I had taken Spanish in middle school and just fell in love with the language. I wanted to speak it all the time, wanted to listen to music in Spanish, wanted to read in Spanish. And when I learned that I can sing in Spanish, that was just a game changer. And so I wanted to find songs that I could sing in Spanish and also do for sort of events with my choir or other events that our music school had, or the music program at our school had. And through sort of taking voice lessons, I learned like, I get to learn other languages if I sing in this style. So German and French and Italian came in, and later on Portuguese, which is now a huge part of my life, linguistically and musically.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about that. I know that you had 2 Fulbrights to go to Brazil. What was that like for you?
I went down on English teaching assistantships, and I worked with universities and institutes in Brasilia. So half of the time I was in a classroom doing cultural-based activities related to American culture and English language. And then the other half of the time I dedicated to personal research projects, such as collaborating with choirs in the area, working with coaches on Brazilian art song, and just anything related to music that I could find in my community. So I really enjoyed one element of using the more linguistic side of the job to bring together elements of my culture, both musically from the United States. I put on a recital that was American art song and Brazilian art song juxtaposed together, like with elements of folk. So we had some Aaron Copland, we had some correlating composers from Brazil that was of a similar style, based on themes and folk songs from Brazil and its history. So it's cool to be able to share both of those elements.
So I know that both of you are deeply passionate about language. And I'm curious to know more about that. Gigi, you mentioned that you went to Brazil and that you fell in love with Spanish, which led you to all these things. And I know Portuguese is a huge passion of yours. Matthew, you mentioned that growing up, Spanish was kind of everywhere. And I know that you are working on a book of Spanish diction. Tell me more about what draws you to language and how that fits with your life as a singer.
Started off as a language nerd thing. The University of Minnesota offered a course in Portuguese for speakers of Spanish. So since they are very similar in their roots, being a Romance language, they were able to offer a course that was 4 semesters crammed into 1 semester. Yeah, it was a lot. But Portuguese was just unlike any other language I'd ever really heard or had experience with. And I could read it pretty easily when I started out, and just how different Portuguese sounded from Portugal versus Brazil, and the musicality of just the way that the language is spoken, and also how that translates to the music that comes from different regions was really interesting to me. But I didn't realize that so many songs that I really enjoyed listening to when I was in high school, I was really into jazz, and I didn't realize that Brazil had such a huge part of history in jazz with their bossa nova stylings and with their popular music. And so songs that I'd known in their English translation, later I discovered that they were originally Brazilian. And so I was able to learn the words, having already known the melodies, and just really fell in love with it and decided to continue studying.
I like to say that I am a native listener of Spanish, that I have grown up, hearing this language, and I guess, native listener of English as well, and a native speaker. But language is always, because it was around me, it's always fascinated me. And like you were saying with your story about classical music leading you to different languages, it was the same for me. It, people say that music is this universal language, and you may disagree or agree, but it does provide us with the opportunity to engage with many languages and many cultures and forms of expression and of poetry. And so I have found that singing classical music, singing art songs, singing really anything in various languages, and doing it as well as you can, so like really studying hard for the phonetics and for the pronunciation and for the nuance of the language. It is gratifying as a singer to actually make those sounds, but it's also really just humbling and so beautiful to connect with audiences in that language, in their native language. And I tell my students all the time, you'll never know, one day we will be able to perform again in public and have, collaborations like we have in the past. It will happen. But you never know who is in your audience. I've been able to sing, German songs for people, and then somebody comes up and says, "I just loved everything that you said in that piece. When did you study German?" And I said, "Well, just a couple semesters in college. That's it. Like, I'm not really a speaker, right? But thank you for telling me I have good diction." Same thing with French, and actually even with Swedish, right? And so having these experiences of people just connecting with you because you've been able to sing in these languages and to communicate with people, that's what it's about. I mean, it's beautiful music, it's fun to sing, but it's really nice to have that connection.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember I sang in the Barcelona Festival of Song over in Spain a few years ago, and I'm not a speaker of Catalan, but we worked really hard on the diction, and most of the audience was Catalan from that area. And I remember the song that I sang in the performance, you can feel that moment when people are with you.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's kind of this like wave of energy that you're riding, and that was the whole way through both of the songs that I sang that were originally from Catalonia, in that area. And so that was such a unique experience to feel like an entire wave of people was with me while singing.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, to be able to, and I think the thing that's really surprising to me is, like I said, I'm not fluent in any of these languages, but, to, work really hard and say, okay, this is what I really want to say, and this is what the poetry means, and I'm going to really get my message and my story across, and then to actually have it land, that's just, it's overwhelming to have that sense.
Why do you think we don't sing in Spanish more? And Gigi, I'm wondering if same with Portuguese. Why don't you think we bring in those Romance languages and we sing so much in Italian, for example?
so maybe in one word, I would say like racism, honestly. But I think also just like kind of a Eurocentric, ethnocentric kind of idea about what the conservatory is, and maybe even going further than that, what music is and what music should be, and maybe who music is for, right? There's a lot of current discourse on like, whose music is this and who should participate. I'm one, of course, who's a proponent of bring everybody in. It's for all of us. It's for all of us to participate in. Yeah. So I also didn't get to sing in Spanish until I think my senior year of college, and didn't really have any guidance for it. Like I said, I had grown up hearing it and speaking it to an extent, but didn't really get a diction class in like, well, how do I make this efficient? How do I really enjoy the sounds? And how do I make sure that I'm doing what's appropriate for the way that the words are set here, right? We spend so much time doing that with French and with Italian and with the German, right? And so I think there's this kind of idea that maybe Spanish is lesser, or that it's, to be blunt, it's the music of the brown people. And so we don't need to, excuse me, that I think that Spanish is maybe lesser, or is the music, is the language of brown people, and so doesn't really have a place within the classical curriculum. But I teach all of my students Spanish. I require them to sing in Spanish. I actually changed my whole diction sequence here at the university so that we have Spanish as a unit within lyric diction. First of all, a lot of them have taken the language, and so they're familiar with it. Second of all, we live in an area where there's Spanish spoken all around us. And so, when they go to be performers, and they go to be teachers, and they go to be educators and worship leaders, they will be comfortable with engaging in this language that is around them, and therefore, again, communicating to their communities, right? And so I think it's important for those reasons. Also, pedagogically, Spanish is actually more legato than Italian because of the soft consonants that happen, and because there's no double consonants to stop the breath flow. And so, Spanish is so lyrical, and there's lots of great repertoire out there. And so I teach my students Spanish. I encourage more people to do it. I think it's good for your technique and good for your soul.
Yeah, similarly with Portuguese, there's such a hesitancy to teach anything in Portuguese because it's just not, people don't have the confidence with the language. There's no exposure really to how to sing in Portuguese. Now, thankfully, there are a lot of resources that are coming out, actual books on Portuguese lyric diction, but it's considered, much like Matthew said, as like a language associated with with South America, which is not that Western European centric model of conservatory teaching that we have here. Luckily, I had a teacher who encouraged me to sing in Spanish and introduced me to singing in Portuguese early on in college. But aside from that initial encouragement, I had to seek out a lot of resources and teaching on my own from festivals and from actually going to places where people speak the language and sing in it.
The first time I sang in Spanish, when I sang in Spanish in my graduate studies, my teacher said, "Oh, those kind of vocal problems that you had are like going away." So, there's a power of language and something that's connected to our DNA, to our blood, that can help us, right? And so it was able to help me to become a better singer. And so I don't know if there was even being exposed to music that I had not heard so much and nobody else was singing in their vocal recitals or things like that. I thought, oh my gosh, listen to all this amazing music. Like, why don't I know this? Why haven't I been assigned this? Why isn't it on more recitals?
Yeah, and I'm encouraged to see a lot of people doing research now and creating publications and making music more accessible for these types of languages and poetry and song. But we still got so far to go.
Yeah.
And I think when you're a lover of the language, I think about it being like soul music.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, not the genre, right? But it's just music that when you sing it, something inside you kind of just rings true, right? It's even if it's a derpy little piece of a hymn, of a carol collage, and it's 8 measures, all of a sudden something inside you vibrates and says, this is true, and this is who I am. especially if it's something that you've had to seek out and that you've fallen in love with. And I think there's such pain, right, and almost being denied this heritage or this part of who you are. Or I think, you know, in it, let me phrase this, having to work so hard to find something that is so meaningful and then have to advocate for it being worthy. Like, what I'm doing is worthy, even though it's not French, even though it's not German. Like, what I'm doing is just as valuable, and it's not other. It's just you don't know about it yet. We've all met through singing in choir. We met through singing and border crossing. Gigi, I think we met through Impulse, but we met in choir. What kind of music are you drawn to with choirs? You know, what sparks joy when you sing with a choir?
The things that move me are like, you know, anything that expresses. And sometimes that's what somebody might describe as beautiful, with like, you know, legato lines and sustained long notes, or, you know, something really high and pianissimo, or also very aggressive and energetic and with lots of consonants and maybe in a difficult language, like Estonian, I don't know. You know, all of these things, that motivates me, that inspires me, it brings me, it makes me want to be a part of it all.
Yeah, I echo so much of that. I think when I was growing up in choirs and even early on in college, I hadn't fully made the connection of like, oh, like it's not just the soprano section and this is me singing my soprano line. Like, I can actually listen to the other parts while I'm singing and figure out how my voice fits in there. And that's been the coolest thing working in choirs and singing with choirs primarily throughout the past several years, that it's not just my line. Like, there are parts that I love of pieces where I'm not singing. Like, I am a background color and there is this like whole other thing happening. It's just the coolest thing to experience that both as an artist and like from the outside too.
Yeah,
So,
you know, one of the reasons that I want to teach and want to be a part of music still is that I've had all these experiences where I'm singing with the chorus, I'm in the chorus, and you are collaborating with others, you're breathing with others, you're living with others, you're loving with others, you're doing this thing that is quite literally impossible to do by yourself. But it also makes you feel like you're a part of the universe, like you are much larger than you actually are, that your voice is larger than it is, that you are making more of an impact than you ever think that you could.
yeah.
I love that. And I'm sitting here like, oh, my heart, because we've lost so much of that in the past couple of months. And I think that your comment, Matthew, about like you're greater than it's the sum of the parts, right? What's the phrase?
Like
greater
than the sum of the parts.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah.
You are. And I think, Gigi, like when you're like, yeah, I'm the soprano and like I'm the most important. I'm sure Matthew would disagree. But it's those moments where okay, where you have the other part come in, or I think it's those moments where like, oh my gosh, I have to breathe. Oh, I have 4 other people next to me. They got me.
I love that. I love too the breath metaphor of just like, we're all in this together. We can breathe. We can, somebody can step out and step back in.
Mm-hmm.
But another aspect that I love about choral singing is when you find that voice that you stand next to that just goes shoop, and like your voice is just kind of, that's a good voice for you to stand next to. It's magic. Like, you're like, oh, we do cool things when we stand next to each other.
I love that when you're with a different part next to you, because, you know, it's more challenging, and you can like really understand what's happening harmonically and like contrapuntally, like you said. But it also is a responsibility, and that makes it feel like, you know, I can do this, and it gives you a dose of inspiration and of courage that like I can hold my own with this part, with this other person, and we can do this. We can do this together.
Do you ever have those moments when you're like rehearsing something by yourself and you're like, ugh, I really don't like this entire page or 2 of the music, but then once you put it all together with everyone in the room, you're like, this is my favorite part of the whole piece?
Oh, or the reverse where you're like, I got this. This is so easy. And then you put it together and you're like, oh, we're singing in 7ths and I am the 7th.
Ooh.
Circle. Like, I don't want to, you know, out myself, but that has happened more than once. Speaking of choir experiences that bring people together, talk to me about La Pasión and what that whole like experience was like?
Life-changing, maybe I should say. I don't want to sound like I don't know, a broken record or something, but it was it was an experience unlike any other for me. We haven't really gotten a chance to talk about this yet, but so Spanish, even though I wasn't like growing up speaking it all the time, I did, and it was around me, and so um, having the opportunity to sing in Spanish, every time I get to do it, it's always just like a blessing. It's such a pleasure
Mm.
to sing in this gorgeous language, which is why I wrote a text on Spanish diction. But also, not only that the fact that it was entirely in Spanish and this huge major work in this wonderful language, but it also had all of these different musical styles. They were all like Latin styles of some sort, and engaging with that was just so fun because it allowed me to sing in a way and also to sing in musical styles that are not always found in classical songs and found in art songs. And so that was really exciting to kind of blend all the things I used to hear on the radio or hear at the parties and things like that, and sing music that was like that, like this music like Celia Cruz, in the middle of something where you're also singing classically, singing, at the top of your range, having to navigate through your passaggio. It was just such an amazing experience.
Yeah, all of the colors that came out and that were such a part of woven into that tapestry of music was just so neat to be inside of it. So I just moved back from Brazil like probably 6 months prior to that. And so having little glimpses of things that I had observed when I was in Brazil and little musical elements of things that that I had sung and seen in Brazil was cool to have that on the main stage at Orchestra Hall, and to see how not only as something that I resonated with, that I saw, but to see how it interacted with all of those other parts in the piece was so beautiful. It was life-changing. It's still the coolest thing I've ever done.
By far.
By far. I don't know if that will ever change.
When we do it again, it'll be even better.
Round 2.
Yeah. Going back to like language again, I think that really reinforces that like we can use language to express ourselves in any way possible, right? The language of samba and the language, like bossa nova, or these like fun Latin rhythms, can also express tremendous piety and pain and reverence and holiness, right? And so just because it sounds like something we would have heard from like an album at a party or something, doesn't mean that the message can also not be tremendously important in a very different way. And I think that's just so cool.
And something I've learned too, through some of the research that I've done, is that in regards to classical music and popular music in Brazil and South America, there's a very blurred line between the two of them. So there's a lot of stuff that can be performed in a classical style, and similarly in a folk style or in a popular music style, that can carry that same message and have sort of that same background. Much like how Mercedes Sosa was singing Todavía Cantamos, and how that was translated into a classical contemporary, that middle movement in La Pasión, how that could be taken something as inspiration for it, and still carrying that same deep message, but just in a new path.
The final part of our interview is the Songshare. The Songshare is drawn directly from our community sings, and it's a chance for the people that you've been listening to share a piece of music that is meaningful and special for them. Enjoy.
When I was asked to find a song that kind of like spoke to me, I thought of Schubert's Frühlingslaube. It's faith in spring, and I think it's kind of become like a just like a mantra for me for my life that die Welt wird schöner mit jedem Tag. Man weiß nicht, was noch werden mag. Das blühen wir nicht enden. That the world grows more beautiful every day. Nobody knows what will happen, but the blooming will never end. Die Welt wird schöner mit jedem Tag. Man weiß nicht, was noch werden mag. Das Blühen will nicht enden. Es will nicht enden.
I'm going to sing Bob Marley's Three Little Birds today. This was my lullaby growing up. My mom used to sing this to me when I was upset, and it still makes me feel better to this day. When I was living in Brazil, two of my roommates were ornithologists. They studied birds, so we referred to ourselves as the Three Little Birds too. And so this song has just come with me over the years. Woke up this morning, rise with the rising sun. Three little birds sat by my doorstep, singing sweet songs of melodies pure and true, singing, this is my message to you. Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be alright. Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing is gonna be alright.